What is going on, guys? Welcome to the Wednesday live stream. I was apparently talking to myself and forgot to hit go live, so there you go. It's been a crazy day, as we can tell. Happy belated welcome to the live stream after talking to myself for a few minutes. My apologies on that one. So how's everyone doing today? Happy Wednesday. Welcome Philly, RB, Marcus Reef, Producer Reef, Revo13, Braveheart Reefer. Hopefully you guys are doing fabulous today. Today is a bit of a free-for-all, so if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask away. My streaming software seems slightly off a little bit, so hopefully this is working. This was trying to do some backup and for me, but gotta start when you gotta start. So yeah, overall, exciting news. I got a new frag tank. Exciting, sitting in my carport. So Dylan, if you're watching, a big shout out and thank you to you for helping me pick that up yesterday. And I did pull up the photo of it somewhere. Where is it? New tank. So, new tank finally delivered. Really excited. I have to clear out this old one and all the stuff first before I can actually get it in the house and then plumb it and get everything set up. Kind of a little bit of an upgrade, but it's also a consolidation. I'm trying to get to my goal of 2 tanks. So I got the water box and then I got the frag tank. So I got multiple little frag tanks on the roll, and it's just gonna be nice to have 2 systems done. None of these tanks all over the place. So really excited for that. Pet work. Is 50 gallons too heavy for a second floor? No, I wouldn't worry about 50 gallons. Anything under a 90 gallon, you're fairly safe. 50 gallon, you're probably safe wherever. If you are worried a little bit, ideally try and put it near a load-bearing wall, and it gives you a little bit of an extra safety. Sky High Reef, $4.99 super chat. Tank and videos are amazing. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you. You actually made the live stream. That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you. So I've ordered like the plumbing and all these parts, honestly, like 6 months ago. So I've had all the stuff slowly building up. So I think I have most of the gear. I'm sure I'll start plumbing it and realize as I forgot or missed some things, but hopefully not too much. Sky High Reef, thank you very much. Have you ever used Downdraft Beckett or Venturi Skimmer? Venturi Drift Skimmer are the main ones that I've used in the past. One question I actually asked earlier today about skimmers was asked, is there a difference in efficiency of a skimmer that has like an internal pump or an external pump? Mainly the ones with an internal pump is for space savings. The one with an external pump is better, a little more performance out of it because your pump is external and you have that full body of a bubble tower. So there's a lot more contact time. Whereas with an internal pump one, you know, that bottom 4 or 5 inches or so is all pump. So you're losing that much of the bubble reaction chamber. So having an external one is more efficient. I've always done an internal though, just because I like the nice sleekness of it. It's more space efficient and you can fit more stuff in your sump. But either one will do the job. External will be a little bit more efficient if you go that route. Looks like another exciting project. Yes, sir, it is. What's going on, Dano and Battle OCR? Welcome, guys. What is up, Devin? Setting up a new 62 cube tank. Awesome. Super excited. Looking forward to that. I've had SPS for a year now. Nice. That's gonna be a nice little upgrade. That'll be awesome. I have all the replacement parts for Vertex calcium reactors. Perfect. My Vertex is gone now. I actually traded it for some coral since I actually was gonna use it on the frag tank, but then I won the Cove one, so Cove one's going on there now. Earlier Galgo was asking, what type of coffee am I drinking? I actually had a look, but there's a little Italian guy downtown locally that brews these, and they're really tasty. They're one of the best ones I found. Joe beans. Probably doesn't help you though, because I know you're in the UK and I'm Canada, and he's local, so there you go. But quite tasty. Thoughts on Waterbox 20 cube? They're a great little tank. I used to have the Red Sea 20 cube. I know the Waterbox is similar, very similar. It was a great little tank. I really like Mighty Dark Coffee. Yeah, it's Americano. I do really like the water box tanks. I know couple things that I noticed on mine versus some of the other tanks is the stand is actual like true legit plywood. It's not press board or particle board. Very, very solid. And the overflow towers, like that's all glass instead of acrylic. So lots of little things like that I find are pretty awesome. Reggie Perryman, $5 super chat. Thank you. Thank you for great content from Houston. Awesome. Thank you very much, Reggie. I appreciate that. I actually have a buddy that lives in Houston, and he's telling me how crazy it is there right now, and he like never leaves his house, and you gotta wear masks everywhere. So yeah, stay safe, buddy, and thank you very much. Getting late here. What's up, everybody? So, what's up and exciting? So for me, Frag Tank will be the project over the next week or two. We'll be getting that installed, running, and then start to migrate all my corals into it. I did have a few little battle a while back where a frag or something I got had some acrid flatworms on it, which was a bugger. Nasty little creatures. I tried using one of those anti-flatworm purge, I think it was. It seemed to mainly work. However, I found I lost a bunch of corals, so it wasn't very pleasant to the tank itself. That was a bit of a harsh treatment. After that, what I think actually fully did work was just dipping them like every single week. And it was a lot of work to dip a 60-gallon tank worth of coral every single week. And I did that for about 5 or 6 weeks. Like 1 week I do Revive, next week I do Coral Rex, and then the next week I do Bear, and I literally just kept doing it. The biggest thing with those is that you kill the adults, but if you don't get the eggs, then they'll come back to bite you. So you need to dip multiple times, and every 6 to 10 day type of range you want to dip again. So if you guys ever have that battle, it sucks, but you 100% can beat them. I also added like a Melanaris wrasse and a Yellow Chorus wrasse, a few things, and I haven't seen anything in over a month, probably longer, almost 2 months now. You definitely can beat it, but a lot of work. So there you go. The other thing I'm going to do just for my own peace of mind is going to chop off all the bases and probably just put everything on brand new plugs when they go into the new tank. It's just like an extra measure, but so far it's good. What is the coral on your green screen? From David L. That is a orange plate coral. So it's a short tentacle plate coral. It's actually about that big, so it's a really cool one. And that's one in my tank now, and that's one of the ones I got off a buddy last Christmas time, whatever. When you shut down the tank, I got a bunch of coral off them. Yeah, it's a beautiful one. So it's quite nice. It has really cool kind of like stripy lines through it and stuff like that. Thumbs up for low nitrates. There you go. Yeah. Earlier I was seeing someone was posting or asking about nitrate levels. In my tanks, anywhere from 5 to 20, I think, is a happy range. And for phosphates, 0.03 to 0.09. That's kind of like the range I go for. For the first time in my life ever, I actually tried dosing nitrates just to see. On my desk, yeah, I just bought some freshwater stuff actually. So Flourish, green screen, Flourish nitrogen. So I'm trying that. Just dump some in just to boost mine up. Because after not testing nitrates in far too long in my frag tank, it was 0.025, which is the lowest nitrates I've personally ever had in my life, which is probably related to part of the dyno. Good cleanup crew for a bare bottom tank. Mainly snails is what I'd probably use in your tank. Snails is clean the glass, they cruise around everywhere, and that's what I go with. I have a question. I can't seem to find the answer from a reliable source. I've heard of biomedias leaching aluminum into the water, not sure which ones to trust and use. I have heard that in the past about Marine Pure. I don't think it's much of an issue anymore. Maybe it was just like an original one-time batch. I'm not 100%. I've used it in the past for many years and I've never had an issue. My bigger issue would be more that they just got soft and crumbly over time. Currently I have a mix of eShop's BioLux and the Brightwell export brick. So I have a mix of those two my sumps now, and they've been great. I actually did just send off an ICP test last week, so I'm kind of curious to see what happens. I'll let you guys know once I hear back, and we'll see what the levels are at. SPS tank, a little stress from Radeon G4 Pros to T5s and Orphic bars. Yeah, so it's a big swap. If you are swapping lights on your tank, first step is you want to match similar par. Ideally you'd match similar spectrum, but that's really hard to do because most people don't have a spectrometer. If you match the par and the duration, that's going to get you 80% of the way there. So ideally get your lights similar par range, make sure your schedule is similar, and it'll be less stress on your corals. But keep in mind, anytime you change something on your tank, if you do a big change, your corals will probably be unhappy for 4 to 6 weeks. Things settle in and then they'll start to be happy again. But any big change on the tank can potentially upset it for a bit. Can you house a sea bait with a carpet? I believe so. I've never seen anemones fight each other. I've had mini maxi carpets. I had a sea bait at one point. I've had bubble tips. I've had rock flowers. The other ones, tube anemones. I have got one of those now. So it is, yeah, I've never noticed an issue between anemones personally. Reef dudes, from Lewis, just won the battle against green hair algae. Awesome. Just decided to make a new optical scape for it. How long should I cook the new scape for? I will encounter a mini cycle. Okay, so couple things. So if you're using brand new rock, I mean, obviously the longer you do it, the better. If you still have your old rock in your tank, just throw some of your new rock in your sump or somewhere and just let it seed with bacteria. If you're trying to like cook it separately. So cooking kind of has a couple different terms. So if you have rock that's been previously used, then cooking it is basically letting it burn off all those organics that are on the rock. So you're just letting it kind of cycle itself and getting rid of all those nutrients so they're not leaching to your tank. If it's new rock that hasn't been cycled yet, then that I would use like a bottle bacteria, just help kickstart that cycle, feed it some ammonia, make sure you got a strong cycle, then add it in, you'll be pretty safe. Or take your old rock, put it in your sump, and add your new rock, just so you're not losing that biomass of the good bacteria. Marcus Reef 499 super chat. Thank you, Marcus. Mighty kind. I appreciate that. Thank you. When will the first video come out for the new tank? Probably, I'm gonna guess, probably 2 weeks. I went to Kyle's house, a buddy's last night, who has the Evergrow light. And I did a video on that like a year ago, and I've been asked a bazillion times for an update on that one. So I finally went over to his house. I was going to do it, and then, you know, lovely pandemics, everything else. So I've been kind of a hermit lately. But so I went over to his house last night and filmed an update on the light, his tank. His tank is looking actually pretty awesome. It's starting to grow in nicely. So I'll probably edit that one up. That's probably gonna be this week's video. And then probably next week's will be the frag tank, because hopefully it will be installed, or at least in the office and starting to set it up by then. That's kind of my plan on that one. Thanks again, Marcus. Appreciate it. Okay, a couple other questions I was asked, like just the last day or two. I just kind of scrolled through my messages and grab a few ones. Someone's asking, do you actually need a gate valve on your plumbing? Can you use a ball valve? Thomas, why, thank you. So the purpose of a gate valve is, over time, a ball valve will get kind of gummed up and it's harder to turn it. So it's harder to fine tune it. So the biggest thing of having a proper gate valve is it's really, over time, it's not going to gum up. It's really easy to turn it, so it's really easy to fine tune it. And you care about this if you want your tank to be silent. One of the noisiest parts is having air and water in your overflow. So having a gate valve allows you to tune it so that it's creating a bit of a wall, so that you're making sure that no air gets sucked into that water tower. So that's one of the best ways to do it. What is your favorite acro? That is a good question. Palmer's Blue Millipora is up there. That's like kind of a really nice blue with like tealy, super shaggy polyps. That one is definitely a beautiful one. Orange Passion's another one I really like because it's got that blue with orange. Other really cool one. Those are probably my current two favorites. I do have some other ones like Pink Lemonade and a few that are really starting to get nice colors. I found the last month or so my tank started to settle in and things have really started to thrive. Oregon Tort, good choice, Thomas, good choice. Oregon Torts are also awesome. So I don't know if I told you guys my dino story or not yet. I think I told you it before I actually hit start on my stream, so I was talking to myself. So I had some dino in Frag Tank A, and I used my special blend of all the random stuff to get rid of it. And I did 3D black and all that jazz, and it's like mostly gone. And it kind of pushed me over the edge a little bit to try a UV sterilizer. So I've thought about this for ages. And it's kind of like that last little bit just poking me. So I just picked up the 57 watt UV sterilizer. So I'm really curious to try this out. This guy is going to go on, I'm going to throw it on the frag tank for a week just to see if it will kill off any residual potential dinos in there. I haven't even opened the box yet, but this, out of all the ones I looked at, this was the best output for its length. Most of them get like super crazy long and massive, and I actually had a 40 watt one before that I gave to my buddy because it was like 3 feet tall. It was crazy. That's the one you got. Perfect. Battle OCR, how do you like it? So I'm excited for it. It seems like a good excuse. Yeah, actually, I had the dinos, I dumped in the food. Like I literally shoveled in the food. I dosed some nitrogen. I dosed some of the Dr. Tim's, dosed some Ectovector 7, all kinds of stuff. So it was like a huge special blend of stuff just to up all my nutrients in the tank. And plus I did a couple day blackout just for fun. So now it's just going to throw the UV on it for a week. And then after it's been on there for a week, you know, kill off any residual dino, then I'm going to put it onto the water box in hopes that I can clean my glass less. So hopefully, we'll see. Queen City Reefers, your peninsula inspired me to do a mainly LPS tank. Very nice with my Red Sea. Beautiful peninsula. I love the way the torches look in your tank. Thank you very much. Torches, honestly, when I walk up to the tank, the first thing you see that draws your eyes to it is the torches, because you have this like crazy bits of like torches swaying, and I don't know, it just looks amazing. David L. Wouldn't ozone help with dinos? I don't know. My ozone is on a different tank than the one that actually has the issue, so maybe. If technically ozone works by using static to break up an oxygen molecule. So O2, oxygen, you zap it with all that static, it breaks it up, then you have O3. So you have this free little oxygen that bounces around and it wants to attach to whatever it can. Wants a friend. As it attaches to stuff, it oxidizes it, breaks it down. And that's kind of how ozone works. That's how it gets rid of the yellowing pigments. So it doesn't care. So anything that flows through your skimmer chamber or your reaction chamber for the ozone will be oxidized. So ozone would likely probably help kill any of the free floating stuff, providing it flows through your skimmer. What's going on, Gabe? Okay, if you had to pick a softie, an LPS, and an LPS side by side and escape, what would you pick and why? These are deep questions. Softie, like full softie? Staring at my tank now. I do not have a weeping willow mushroom or toadstool, but those are super cool. I do have like the Japanese green one. I think the big weeping willow one would be pretty sweet for a softie. I also do like my rainbow clove polyps. Those are also pretty awesome. Oh, Gonipore is more of an LPS. This is tough. Okay. Or rock flowers. Some nice rock flowers would be good too. We could have rock flowers more on the sandy base. And if we had LPS in the middle, I'm thinking if I did a tank themed. So sand bed full of rock flowers. Beautiful. Next up, going to LPS, you could either do torches or Gonipora. One of the two. You could have a whole middle section of that. And then acros up top. Something colorful. What would I do on top? I can only have one. Probably the orange passion at the moment. Now, that being said, I got another tiny little frag of one called Rainbow Confetti that has tons of crazy colors, but it's starting to get there. So that might be really cool, because if you get all these crazy like confetti of freaking colors come out, it might be amazing. Dragon Soul or Reef Raft Angry Birds? I have to Google what Angry Birds is. Ooh, that's pretty too. Blue skin with pink? That's nice too. Yeah, it's so hard. Like honestly, there's so many nice acros. It really is hard to pick. Dragon Soul and Aussie Gold are my two favorite torches. So I do love those. Reef Chili. I'm going to switch from dosing 2-part to running a calcium reactor. I'm going with the Kimura. Thoughts? Are you using the Versa? Yes, I am using the Versa, but I have also previously had the Kimura. Now, the main driver for me switching to the Versa was I had some weird harmonic-y, like vibration harmonics. So you had like different tones in the range of the Kimura. Now, I have like OCD to making my tank quiet. So most people just probably wouldn't even notice their bug. But to me, I could hear it and I'd like focus on it and it just annoyed me. That was my main driver. Now, I also had the Generation 1, so the newer one might be better. I can't say. But the Kimura was a great pump overall, so you'll definitely be happy with it. So that should be good. The Versa's been very solid as well. The nice thing I like, the new one is Wi-Fi. But I like that I could be sitting there and like open my app and be like, oh, that's a little high, a little low. And like, okay, there's 2 more mil of flow and we're good. So that part makes it really easy. Okay, how many gallons per hour are you going to go through UV? I have no idea yet. The way I'm going to pipe it up is right now off my return, I have a little, what do you call it? Like a union valve that I put in for a purpose of potentially changing this later. Because I've been debating EV for a while now. And that goes to the cryptic reactor. So I have a big reactor from Geo, which is like cryptic, which basically means it's just full of biomedia. And there's a big duct around it, so it's dark. So it's just a dark zone for all your biomedia to grow. So the UV is going to be piped in en route to that. So it's only going to be a 1/2-inch line coming into it. Apparently I didn't grab those fittings. So on here, I also ordered the 2-inch to 1/2-inch threaded little adapters. So I'm going to put those inside of it. And so it's basically going to come off the TMI return. It's going to run through the UV, then through the little cryptic zone and come back. So it's probably going to be a little bit of a lower flow, but I don't 100% know what flow is. I don't have a flow meter to test it. I'm still on the fence if it's useful or not to put one on and see. But Either way, it's going to be water flowing through it. It's going to help kill some of the water bacteria, or hopefully some of those algae. And hopefully my main goal is if I can clean the glass less, awesome. Right now I clean it like probably every other day. I get that kind of film on the glass, and hopefully that will fix it. All right, this is a big one. Okay, Marcus, favorite torches as well. Yeah, so favorite torches, Aussie Gold and Dragon Soul, hands down, are my two favorites. Best way to put a fish through medicated quarantine. Some deep questions today. So, if you are going to quarantine a fish, first of all, if there is no signs of ick and other stuff, I'm always hesitant on if it's worth doing copper. So copper is, basically like a low dose poison, so it's not really good for the fish. Now, if you have a parasite on the fish that you're killing, it is better than the parasite for the fish, right? So if you're treating something, then it makes sense to do it. Using it for just no reason, I'm kind of on the fence on it. Now, if I was going to do that, what I would do is my express quarantine route is about a 2-week quarantine, in which I would use copper power because I find that one's easier on the corals, and I find it's easier to test for. Like, it's harder to overdose it, and overdosing is really bad. So if you are doing this, I would do copper power for 2 weeks, and then I would also use, what's it called? Prosi Pro. I do 2 doses of Prosi Pro. So I do the copper power, like ease them into it over a couple days up to your current full strength. And then at that point, once they're in there, they're happy. Then I would dose Prosi, which is going to deal with the internal parasites. Then about a week later, you do a second dose of Prosi. And at that point, you're about your 2 weeks of your copper. And that's kind of like my express quarantine if I'm worrying about something on a fish, and I do it that way. Peroxide. I only do copper. There's a sign, to protect it from any other fish in the quarantine. Yeah, so I mean, I don't like treating unless I have to. I would use Prosi Pro because it will get rid of internal parasites that you can't really test for or know if there's one. But aside from that, I mean, copper I'm always on the fence for. Cleaned 2 scallops who had velvet after bass 2 days. Oh, 2 scopas. There you go. I have heard of people using like some peroxide and stuff. I've used it only for killing algae, so I haven't used it for any type of bass. I had a buddy that used to dose it to his tank, and he claimed it got rid of a ton of algae. It'd basically be like using ozone in a way because it would drip in and oxidize. Can't decide if you want to run all 3 fish through copper. If you already have fish in your tank and you didn't quarantine 100% all of them, then there's a chance something's already in there. I mean, it's kind of a weird way of looking at it, but it's true. Prosi and peroxide bath are the way for everything I did research on. There you go. Humblefish has a big thread about it, and I believe it was to do with the peroxide and that as well, on his kind of like experimental dipping quarantine type of dealio. That might be a good read too if you guys want to dig into that one a bit more. Still using the Reef Rack shells. Well, yes, I am actually. They're still in my tank. The Reef Racks ones are the ones that look like natural rock. Very cool. In fact, the one I have is completely covered in zoas. You can't even see the rock anymore. It's literally just like a zoa shelf. For the new build, yeah, I probably will. Most of that stuff's all just going to move into the new frag tank, so I'll be good there. Okay, another question I've had answered way too many times lately. A week or 2 ago, 2 weeks ago, whatever it was, I did a video on my G5 light schedule, and some people had an issue downloading it and then re-importing it into your Mobius. So the method that worked for me, and everyone I've told it to do this way, it seems to work for them, is to save it to Dropbox and open it from Dropbox. So depending on what your phone is, sometimes, the app might only see certain shares, but Dropbox seemed to work well for that. Now, if you click on it and it opens like a page of code, it means it's not prompting you to save or download the file. So in that case, if you're on your cell phone, you probably just have to click and hold that link and get that second menu to pop up, and then you can say save or download. If you're on a computer, just right click and save as if it doesn't download automatically when you click on it. So you need the file not to open as a web page. And then from there, you take that file and then import it into Mobius, and it should be good. Oh yeah, Battleless, your question from earlier. Let's chat about how scary it is adding dozens of tangs, always looking at the tank thinking of an issue. So if you are adding many tangs at once, tangs can be territorial. So the best time to do it is if you're changing up your aquascape or if you're upgrading your tank, adding them at once to a new place. No one has their own territory yet, and you're going to have a better path to success that way. I have 3 yellow tangs, a hippo tang, a purple tang. I think that's all my tangs. Oh, and a sailfin tang in my tanks. I got like 6 tangs in there. Everyone's happy, everyone gets along. But again, I had most of these tangs prior, and I added them all at basically the same time. That way, they kind of get along with each other. There's a little bit of like on the boss a little bit for the first day or two, and then they seem to settle in. Everything's been fine ever since. How far would you put an acro from a dragon soul torch? Further's better. I do have 1 milli that the top of it's all white because it kept getting tickled and stung by the torch. I mean, it depends on your flow. If it's upstream of the flow, so the flow's pushing away from it, then you're fairly safe to be close. But if your flow's changing, it's going back and forth, you want to make sure you leave a good buffer room. Because some of those sweepers can be crazy long. Like, oh, they're like that, and all of a sudden this one's like, bloop, 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 way over there. So it's crazy how much of a difference some of them can actually be. Only lost 1 out of 30. That's actually not bad. They all want the same place to sleep at night. Yeah, so another big thing I find is having caves or homes for the fish. Usually a lot of the aggression is either A, not feeding enough, so if they're hungry, they'll be more aggressive. If you feed lots, they're more docile. And not having like their own little caves or little hiding spots, because everyone wants its own little nook and cranny to go into. And if there's more fish than nooks and crannies, then that's where another time of aggression can start. So it's kind of making sure you account for that when you escape your tank and they have all those little hidey holes. The Scopus didn't want the other Scopus in the tank, even though they went through quarantine together. Yeah, that's no good. Now, again, it all depends on the personality of the fish, right? Some guys are friendly and others are not so much. What's the best garlic-based vitamin dip to use dry pellets for clownfish? I've never really used garlic, so I can't comment. I know Celcon's super popular as kind of like a nutrition type of dip. I honestly don't feed pellets very often. I feed frozen majority of the time, but Celcon's probably the one I'd recommend just because I know a lot of people have success with it. Grani Poria tended to favor slightly dirtier water. Yeah, they don't want it too pristine, and that's kind of the challenge with a mixed reef tank, is finding that happy balance where everyone's happy, right? It's kind of a fine line to keep that balance of nutrition levels and nutrients in the water. So Smokin' Reef, earlier another one you asked, had a sudden growth spurt and my elk dropped by 2 DKH. I was at 8, I run Triton, I need to bring it up. I dose 10 mils a day, how many extra mils? So you can they probably have a bit of a dosing calculator to figure that out. But in general, if you drop 2 DKH, I'd probably start at about 13 or 14 mils and see what it does. The biggest thing is test your tank, dose that much, and then 24 hours from now, test at the exact same time. So if you test at 1 p.m., dose your 10 mils, up it to 13, 14 mils, and then test again and see what the difference is. And if you're 8 one day and the next day you're 8 on the dot, your dosing is right. Now, if you're like, okay, your dosing's still too low, okay, you need to up it a little bit more. Now, the other thing is if you want to correct it, you can use a dosing calculator, make a corrective dose. But to calculate how much to dose, you have to test. So you have to test, do that dose that you think you need, 24 hours, within half an hour or so, within that hour, 24 hours later, test again and see what it is. And then if it's too high, okay, you dose too much, lower it a bit, right? And if it's too low, then maybe add a little bit more. So you just got to find that balance, but you want to make sure you wait about 24 hours to test at that same point. Okay, vermitid snail solution. So vermitid snails are like the little guys that have a little tube and they come out of it. You're on your rocks. 2 main things I see. Some people will say super glue the tube. So if you can, put a little bit of glue on it, or just break it off. If you just break their tube off is another way. Supposedly bumblebee snails will eat them. I don't know if that's true or not. I do have a soul bumblebee snail and they don't really have any vermid, so it might be true. But that's one of the current theories. I feed frozen mysis as well. I'm trying to get them to eat pellets as well, so they don't just want mysis only. Yeah, if you have a new fish or a picky fish, I find most things will eat mysis. So I feed mysis majority of the time just because it's kind of local, and it's actually from the lake that's like 20 minutes away from me, so it's kind of cool. But yeah, it's good stuff. But if you're doing pellets, just mix some pellets in with the frozen, or just try and like alternate what you feed, and they'll get adapted to it. But when you're trying to wean a fish from one food to another food, mixing the two foods together is a good way to do it, because then they'll start to taste it as they eat the other stuff, and eventually they'll get that bit of a taste for it. Does GFO affect Chaeto? And even if there is PO4 present, my Chaeto is growing until I switched to high capacity GFO, and now it's crumbling. Okay, J Fusion, you likely have too much GFO. So in your scenario, I would remove some GFO, or lower your flow, or use less GFO. So if your Chaeto is going to pull nitrate and phosphate out of your water, GFO is pulling phosphate out of your water. So if you pull out too much phosphate, you could be starving out your Chaeto, and that might be why it's dying off. So I would tone down how much GFO you're using. Manuel D, first time on the live stream. You rock, dude. Thank you. Appreciate it. And welcome to the live stream, Manuel. Robert, I did vodka, bacteria, bubble method, and eradicated the dinos. Excellent. Good to hear. So that's the original way. I actually had dinos as well in the first month or two of the water box, and I used that whole regime on it and got rid of it all. So it definitely works. I've done it myself. I'm doing a slightly different kind of a winged approach on this tank, just because I like to experiment, because it gives me more knowledge to share with you guys. So I do experiment a lot, but I have done the method all myself, and now it's kind of like a hybrid, make it up as I go experimentation method I'm doing on it now. But I'm getting Bergia nudibranchs tomorrow. How long do you acclimate them for? I didn't really acclimate mine at all. I literally temperature acclimated and just put them in, as long as the salinity is roughly the same. The tank that I had them in didn't even have an auto top off, so it actually had some decent salinity swings, and they didn't seem to care. It was in that little 5-gallon that was sitting on my office floor, and I just moved that to one of the other frag tanks now. So they're currently in there, and I know there's a bunch of aptation in there that hopefully they can munch on, and I'm hoping they'll eventually breed and have much. I had eggs tons of times, but I've never seen the babies, so they're either really tiny or maybe they didn't hatch. I'm not sure. That's hopefully. Would you consider hermit crabs reef safe? I'm sure they killed my frog spawn in my previous tank. Sure worried about adding them to the new tank. Okay. So snails are your safest. Hermit crabs or shrimp or any of these little crustacean type of creatures are very opportunistic. So if you don't feed them enough, they will potentially go after coral. If you are worried about it, make sure you feed the tank more. Make sure you have that extra fish food. You know, maybe you throw in a bit of nori or a little like algae puck in there, something for them to eat. They will go after mysis. They'll go after pretty much anything, to be honest. But if they are starving and they're hungry, they will potentially go after corals. So my guess is they were hungry and in opportunistic mode. Now, generally, I like snails more than crabs because they're less of a hassle, other than my wrasses snacking on them. Is over skimming a myth? So your tank could be too clean. So it also depends what other equipment you have for your filtration. So back in the day, everyone's, they're like, oh, more water changes, feed less, keep those nutrients down. And now I see posts like constantly and questions about people trying to raise their nutrients, and should I be dosing nitrates and phosphates? So if your tank is too clean and there's not enough like particulates in there, certain corals will not be as happy. Now, if you have like every type of filtration known to man and everything's on there, then yes, I mean, you could be pulling out too much. So it's hard to say just skimming in general. I tend to leave my skimmer on just 24/7, and I think a good chunk of the benefit is from the gas exchange from it. So I don't think you really need to worry about over skimming. But it does kind of come into play with all the other gear you have in your tank as well. I think I need to scrape eggs off the glass work for me. Try that. Yeah, mine always laid the eggs on the glass too for the Bergias. Thoughts on high-end acros like Walt Disney and Homewrecker? Well, I have a little nub of Walt Disney in my tank that I got from my tank shutdown. It's kind of a little mound. It's like starting to do a little bit, but it's been like the slowest grow ever for me. I'm hoping one day it will grow and be pretty, hopefully. Meldium. Hey, Devin, it's been a while. Welcome back. Just curious, if you have a slightly high nitrates and phosphates, is higher DKH ideal until resolved? Throat's really dry. So there is a bit of a balance there where I think it's higher nitrates, that you can have higher light and a bit of higher elk. I think that's what it is. or if it's vice versa, I gotta see. But elk isn't necessarily rated to your DKH, but light levels can be. So your light intensity to your nutrient levels do have a bit of a balance. Yeah, Greg was saying a skimmer is not efficient enough to overskim, but it's not something I would overly worry about. As for elk, honestly, the biggest thing is stability. Like your tank can adapt to low nutrients, it can adapt to low elk, can adapt to high elk. It just doesn't like the changing. So pick something, stick with it, and then honestly, your tank will probably be happy once it's been there for a while. Will Elegance Coral take out all of your snails? No, not all, because I have a massive Elegance that's like a football in my tank. And there's a couple snail shells around it. If they fall into it, there's a good chance they'll be goners, but majority of the snails don't fall into it and they're fine. Love the close-up of the Fungia. Thanks, DC. Good to see you, buddy. Elder 1945. What's going on, Kyle? You've done a lot of cool stuff lately. Love seeing all those posts, so keep the cool projects coming. Alright. Okay, so another one. I've been getting a lot of wrasse questions lately in like bare bottom versus sand. So can you keep wrasses in a bare bottom? Certain wrasses do need to sleep in sand, and certain wrasses will sleep in the rocks. So you need to do a little bit of research to know what kind of wrasses you're keeping and what they need. I will likely just put like a little acrylic tray with sand in like one of the corners of my tank, because I do have a Melanaris and yellow chorus I'll be going in there that do like to sleep in the sand. So I will do something for them just so they could have that like sleeping place. Now I'm actually was talking to, I think is it Cammy's Reef? Like she's like obsessed with wrasses. I think she has like 20 or something in her tank. So I might actually bring her on for a stream in a couple of weeks and hit her up about all those random wrasse questions, because she's definitely a lot more hardcore into the wrasses than I am. I do love them though. The reason why is because the theory of ultra low nutrients require lower DKH. Yeah, there is somewhat of a ratio there. I haven't paid enough attention to it, but I've heard it enough times. There's probably some validity to it. I kind of just keep all my stuff in the middle because I think it adds a bit of a buffer. Like if your nutrients are too low, then you can get like those super pale corals and stuff. But I feel like you're also stressing it on like the line, you know, or same thing. If stuff's really high, again, it could also adapt to it. But if you're kind of keep your stuff in the middle, you got buffer on either way, and there's less chance of you pushing your corals over the edge. So that's why I kind of go for the happy medium of it all. Just nano reefs. What's a good solution / approach to get rid of dinoflagellates and red slime? So I've actually done a live stream with Cruz probably a year ago now, which we talked about pretty in depth, and we did post a regime, which is in my Facebook group. If you just search for dino in there, you'll find it. But the quick and dirty gist of it is you add like Dr. Tim, it's one and only, or Sludge, you have a bottle of it somewhere. One of the Dr. Tim's bacteria will actually fight the dinos. So you add that to your tank. Now, then you dose like a carbon source, like a vodka or something else, which is going to feed that bacteria and help it explode. Now, as your population of bacteria grows, it's also going to be sucking out oxygen out of your water. So you need to add an air bubble or something back into it. My dog's a little excited. Sorry about the crazy pooch. Someone's probably here. And that's basically the gist of it. So you're fighting bacteria with another bacteria. That similar method can work with cyano as well, but honestly, something like ChemiClean gets rid of it pretty darn quick and works well. And I've also used the other one by KZ that also works pretty well. So both ones kind of work. You can naturally get rid of it, but I've had these little tiny battles for ages, and honestly, just ChemiClean gets rid of it fast. Can I show my tank, please? Maybe next week I'll do one. I actually show it. This one I'm on the computer, so I can't really drag it around with me, but I'll do a cell phone live stream in the near future and go through it. What is that red slime? Favorite fish that get big? Triggerfish are really cool fish. I love how they swim. Also, there's tons of beautiful tangs. There's a lot of cool fish. This doesn't really count because I already have like 6 tanks in my tank, but I do like having like a big schools of little fish, giving a really cool scale to your tank too. Powder blue tang is probably one of my favorites. Do you think a 100-gallon tank is large enough for powder blue? Okay, so you're probably borderline okay. A big thing with tangs in triggers and some of these fish is swimming space. So if you had a 3-foot tank that was really tall, that is not very good for them. You have a 5 or 6-foot tank that's shallower, that's a lot better for them because they have swimming space. So it's hard to stay off just gallons. I really think a big chunk of it is just that length and that actual swimming space for them because they're very active fish, right? So you want to have lots of swimming space. So longer the tank, the better. That's my advice on a lot of those type of fish. Is there any issues gluing corals to a back wall? Nope, not at all. You can 100% do it. Magnets is easier. What corals would you recommend beyond GSP? Plate corals can look really cool on the wall. If you get one of those little single mounts, you can get ones that look like, I think Reef Racks and some other companies make them, but they look like a single frag holder and they're magnetic. So you can put whatever coral you want on it and it'll grow on it. On mine, like I have, what is it? The green that turns into purple. Mind blanking. Anyways, that one's touching my back wall. It looks like it's just starting to grow up the glass. So I think that will be pretty cool later. Rainbow loom. That'll be good. What's going on, Remy? Welcome. What's your favorite equipment guy? Oh, what's up, Seymour? Reefing with O. These are hard questions. Like, you know how hard it is to pick a favorite item or a thing? There's so many things that are good. I don't know. It's because every chunk of equipment does something different. And I like them for different reasons. You can pick a category, I'll give you my favorite in that category, but I don't know, it's really hard to pick one thing because everything has different jobs. Snowstorm, discouraged, can't keep GST, it's turning brown. What are your nutrient levels? So if you're questioning, could it be nutrients? Test your nutrients and let us know the results, and then we'll see where you're at. But GSP is hard to kill, so there's got to be something a little off there. Manuel, what is your experience growing red mangroves? I'm thinking of adding some to a separate refugium just for looks. Mangroves can be really cool. They are, buy one that's already rooted because the hardest part is getting them to root and everything start growing that way. We'll get one with roots, a couple leaves that's already established, and that should be fairly easy. The only one thing to note is they do excrete kind of water a little bit to like on their leaves, so you'll want to just wipe off the leaves or mist it with like RODI water once in a while. That's like the only one thing. Aside from that, they should be fairly easy once they got good light. Goniophora feeding tips. So most of the time my tank just gets broadcast fed, so I just dump in some frozen food. Either PE Mysis, the Catalyst are the two I use a lot, or the Reef Nutrition stuff, which I have a bunch of them. I just randomly pick some and dump them in and just broadcast through the tank. Maybe like once a weekish, I'll take some reef roids and I'll like spot feed stuff. And with Gonies, I generally just feed it upstream of it so that the flow makes it flow all past their polyps. I have one of those big Julien's things, and I'll use that just to get down in there and just put it just in front of them so all those particles float past them and they can catch it as it floats by. Ever thoughts of setting up a cold water reef? I have actually. Every time I go to the Vancouver Aquarium, they got lots of really cool cold water stuff, and there's like beautiful anemones. And I've been to Vancouver Island, you walk and there's like tons of anemones just in the Pacific Ocean. Like, it's crazy. So I've thought about it. If I lived by the ocean, I would be highly tempted to do it. Doing it for here, I mean, save on heating costs, but wouldn't be too bad. Dano's Reef, how's the JHL gear going? It is mainly sitting here not doing much yet because it's waiting for this frag tank to be set up. So now that the tank is actually here, I got to get this one that you cannot see, but this one needs to come out of the house, move the next one up. So probably in the next couple weeks, then I'm going to start adding it in. Are you from Vancouver? I am from Kelowna. I am a couple hours from Vancouver. DC, display refugium in the future? Maybe. Thought about it. I have an excessively big sump that's going to be underneath this frag tank with like probably like a 2-foot by 2-foot refugium section. It would be kind of cool to do a little display one in there. So maybe. Could be. Or all rock flowers down there might be cool too. We'll see. Might get creative with that one. Not too sure yet. I've always thought about it, I've just never done it. Would you do a calcium reactor if you don't have SPS coral? It depends on how much non-SPS coral you have. So calcium reactors are great for stability. So here, let me pull up my Apex. So my alkalinity is very, very, very stable, which is awesome. So that's one of the biggest things. So LPS don't care quite as much, but SPS, they're a little more finicky. Okay, so looking at my calcium reactor, so my elk tester tests every 12 hours. So The daytime one or the nighttime one is higher, 8.59. The next one 12 hours later, 8.49. Next test, 8.59, 8.49, 8.5, 8.4. So it's a 0.1 of a swing of elks, a DKH. So super, super duper stable. That's one of the main reasons is I really like calcium reactors. This because once it's a set up and kind of dialed in, they're cheap. Like calcium reactors are expensive to buy, but once you have it, you fill with media like once every year, year and a half. You know, a CO2 tank once a year, year and a half. Like it's very, very cheap to run. For dosing, it's cheap on a small tank, but if you have tons and tons of coral, you know, as you start dosing, you know, 30, 50, 100 mils a day, then it can get expensive. So I always look at stuff like I'll spend more up front if I know I'm going to save me money in the long run. So I always look at long-term costs. That's why I'm a big fan of calcium reactors, especially on a larger tank. Josky Jock, pH 8.2, 8T, alkalinity 8 DKH, mag 1400, calcium 370, phosphate 0, nitrate 2. Okay, so only one issue. 0 phosphates is bad. You don't want 0. You want some. Your corals will suck up nitrate and phosphate from the water. So if you have 0, you're potentially starving them to an extent. So you still want to have some. Sky High Reef. So I'm super into shrooms as of lately. Do you have a garden? I have some. I don't have like a big necessarily garden. I do have that one rock of those orangey, yellow, lemon, citrus rhodactis. Those things are amazing. So I have one rock full. And then I do have just a couple random ones here and there. So not a big garden except for that one rock, but it works pretty good. Turn this fan off. Okay. Thoughts on calc to raise pH. My pH ranges from 7. So 7 is really low. So first, calibrate your probe if you have one. Make sure that's actually 7 and not like just drifted over time. Because you want to make sure it's still in like a fairly happy zone. Not too crazy. Now, calc 100% does work. You can put it in your auto top off and it will just dose it to your tank for you. Or you can kind of premix it and let it drip into your tank, but then you got to do a new tank every day or two and it's just a lot of upkeep. If I was going to do it, I'd personally use a calc reactor because then you can, you know, just fill it every couple weeks. But calc does work well. You can 100% do it super cheap just through your auto top off. It's hard on your pump. So once a month, I'd probably give it like a vinegar citrac, acid bath, and clean it. You do a calc reactor, you can put your pump that goes into it, and then the more caustic, harsher water flows out of it. So it's much easier in your equipment. Whew, reef and chilly, 119 heat wave. That is toasty. Chiller's a workhorse. No kidding, you're yarping that thing there. Gabe's Reef Tampa. What's going on, Gabe? Dursa Clam, light and flow. Clams love light. They can probably take as much light as you want to throw at it. Flow wise, I don't blast them. I tend to do them more like medium to lower flow, but I find they're pretty universal. Like I've seen clams on the sandbag, I've seen up on rocks, and they've never seemed to overly been very finicky. Like I think they're really universal where you put them. Obviously, if you're putting it somewhere super high light, you know, maybe ease it into it or use acclimation load on your lights. But aside from that, it's pretty easy. Ellery Wrong, what is your thoughts on anemone slicing? So I know people will physically frag an anemone. If you're going to do it, use a brand new blade, stainless steel, make sure it's all sterile, and you can do it. Make sure you split them out so it's half and half. I would honestly feel bad doing it because part of me is like, okay, they do it naturally. They will literally like rip themselves in half in the wild, which is kind of crazy. So obviously they can do it. I'd still probably feel bad doing it, but just make sure you're super sterile. If you do it, then make sure that it's through the mouth and both sides have it and it will heal back up. So I haven't done it personally, but I know friends that have and I've seen them do it. So driving home from the work beach, 15 days, Apex heartbeat disconnected a bit. I'm freaking out. Hopefully it's just an internet issue, Glenn, and not something else happening. Melanaris, wrasse, and a clam. I have both in my tank. Seems to be issue free. If anything, actually the cleaner wrasse probably focuses the clam's mantle the most, but at the end of the day, they still seem okay. Are the reef dudes all the OGs? I might as well stay. Exactly. Narcosis, what's going on, buddy? You've changed your name on here. I haven't seen you on here in a while. Just been using sponge baffles and a spare tank as baffles. Sponges can make great super easy baffles. I've seen I think it was Randy on BRS actually. So where they just did that to divide stuff. I'm like, it's like the easiest baffle ever. I think it's a really good way to do it. The only one consideration with using the sponges for baffles is, again, you don't get the different heights in your sump. So you're gonna have a lot of evaporation before your ATO kicks in. So on a small tank with a big sump with no baffles, you might have a little more fluctuation in your salinity. So you might just have to keep an eye on that and see that. Like, you could just put in maybe one legit baffle at the end so your ATO is more consistent. But if your tank's big enough, I mean, it may not be a noticeable impact to worry about, but it's the only consideration that I would think of having the basically one big open box of a sump. Okay, another question that I've been asked a couple times recently was around UV and how long to run it for. If I'm going to put UV on a tank, I'm just going to run it 24 hours a day. I don't think there's too much effort or issue of running that. If you're going to do it, let it filter as much as it can. So I just run mine 24/7. Little off topic, but do you rock and roll? I like rock music. I am not a hardcore guitar player though. Turf scrubber or algae reactor? Okay, so all right, Lewis. So they both work. I've tried both. They both do a similar job of sucking stuff out of here. The only big difference is how much is the cleaning, I guess. Like, same thing. Okay, so we have Chaeto, Refugium. So if you have a decent space, it does easiest one because it's the lowest maintenance. You want it to grow faster, I mean, get a little more intense light on it, and it'll grow quicker. Now, if you don't have space for Refugium, then it brings you into the algae reactors. Maybe you don't have a spot in your sump. So you can have an algae or a Chaeto reactor, which is basically a giant reactor with a light inside, outside, wherever. There's a light in it, so you're growing algae in a tube rather than a sump. So it's basically like a remote sump chamber in a weird way of thinking of it. A little more effort to clean it, it's not too bad. There's another way to do it. Generally, you'll get pretty good growth because it's only a few inches away from the light source, so it's getting lots of power by proximity. Now, the next option is an algae turf scrubber. Now, algae turf scrubbers, generally you want them out of the water. Santa Monica one you can submerge. Most of the other ones, you want them out just to be safe. I would always put them above a sump or somewhere just in case if there's ever a leak. And the biggest advantage of a turf scrubber, one, it contains all the light, so you don't really have to worry about it getting algae and stuff in your sump, so you can keep your sump cleaner. But it grows hair algae as opposed to Chaeto. And hair algae is a simpler algae, like it's more of a basic algae cell type of life form, so it grows quicker. So hair algae can grow faster than Chaeto, so you can get more output for its size. So that's kind of the advantage there. Now it also has some other benefits, like it can pull out some like heavy metals, and it can pull out like ammonia and certain stuff from the hair algae just because it grows so fast. So like a big fish only system or maybe a quarantine system, there's another really good use for using turf scrubber. So I mean, honestly, they're all going to work. They're just different ways of going about that battle, and it kind of depends on your sump and what space you have. And you know, with the turf scrubber, like I clean mine every like 10 to 14 days type of dealio. So it's a little more work to unscrew it and then scrape it off like a credit card and chuck it out and all that jazz. But at the end of the day, they all work. I just got a coca damsel and I already have 2 clowns, 1 bad guy, 1 whale grandma. Will the damsel be a problem? I have no idea what a coca damsel is, so I have to Google that one. But generally, damsels, again, hit or miss. And it depends on their personality. Like, some of them are fairly docile and others a little punk, so depends. I had one Azure damsel. I have like one in the tank beside me. He's awesome. I know one in the other tank. He had a little home in my A-cans, and he would headbutt me or nip me every time I put my hands into the A-cans. It drove me nuts. I eventually gave him to a buddy. He was been fine in his tank, but mine was chaos to me. He attacked me every chance he could get. Dylan Roberts, thanks for your legend. Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it. Joshy Jock, in the last couple of weeks, my hammerheads and a couple of A-can corals bailed out of their skeleton. Do you know what the cause would be? So generally, when a coral has polyp bailout, for lack of a better term, of their polyp, which could be the hammer or the A-can, whatever else, it's usually a stress response. Now, I've seen those little polyps bail out, and I've seen them survive and grow. So it is possible. Usually not as likely, but it's definitely possible. So usually it's a stress response. So a big swing in alkalinity is kind of the first thing I think of. It could be something else, but usually maybe it's a big I don't know, maybe temperature. I don't know if temperature would do it, but likely like a big elk swing or some other big swing in parameters that stress out the coral. The problem is sometimes you can have a swing and you don't see the fallout till like a few weeks later. You're guessing and you don't even know what it was because something happened 3 weeks ago. Well, it's really tricky to say for sure, but generally it's a stress response to something that happened within the last few weeks. Planet 3D, do you believe the number of reef keepers is reducing or growing or increasing years? It's honestly hard to say. I don't know. I would say in general, it's probably growing to an extent. Now, just by going to reefing shows, like, I feel like I see more people at them, so that would kind of lead me to say it. Now, that being said, I live in, there's not a ton of reefing shows where I am, so I mainly go to the States for the shows. But in general, I would say the hobby is growing. Kevin Johnson, I'm rising live brine trips into adults. Is it worth the extra time to feed them to my tank? I think it's more just fun, to be honest. It's cool to like see the fish chase down the brine shrimp and go after them. As for nutrition value, brine shrimp aren't overly nutritious as adults unless you gut load them, which means you're feeding them like spirulina powder or phytoplankton, and that's where they're actually getting the nutrition from. As generally hatching brine shrimp, they are most nutritious when they're first hatched. And first hatch means they still have that little yolk sac from the egg. That's actually the most nutritious part. As they grow older, again, they're not overly nutritious. They're just kind of fun to feed unless you gut load them with something. Okay, Glenn, thoughts on dosing AB plus through a mini fridge? Probably shut my window. There's forest fires from like Washington, California. Started like claiming it's like super smoky out today, but my office was cooking, so I have the window open right now. Thoughts on dosing AB plus through a mini fridge? What I think would be cool, and I've thought about this many times, Glenn, is getting, you can get like little Coca-Cola and little mini fridges that like they're just made to hold a couple pop cans or like a 6-pack of Coke type of thing. One of those, you could easily drill holes in the lid and hook up your dosing lines. I think that'd be a great way to do it. Kyle, you got the turf scrubber installed. Excellent. Kyle won a turf scrubber like last year, and I went over to film at his house the other day and it wasn't hooked up, so I gave him heck. I'm happy to hear you got it installed. That's awesome. But yeah, doing the little fridge thing for dosing is a really cool way to do it. I've seen a lot of people do it with phytoplankton, so you can have like a little magnetic stir in there and just have it suck it out and do it. It would also work well for the AB. It'd be nice if you didn't have to refrigerate it, but Glenn, do you have any inside information on products dropping in 2020? I'd love a forehead dose. I do not know of a forehead dose. The only one, I mean, I got the Philips Coral Care Light, which is coming out soon. I've been beta testing the Max Spec Jumps for a long time now. I know those are coming out pretty soon. That should be close. What else is coming out? The Mastertronic is coming out probably this fall, which I do want. I would love to beta test one if you guys are watching. But I think that's gonna be a super cool product as well. I don't know, those are the only kind of things I think of off the top of my head that are coming out pretty soon. Hobbies growing because of COVID, probably. More people are inside, you're spending more time around your tank rather than going out and doing stuff. If you're hanging out, you want to make your tank better, you're probably adding to it, so I think that certainly does not hurt the hobby at all, being around your tank and give it more love. Hands of Stone. Reef Dudes, I was looking for a water box aquarium and can't figure out what makes them so expensive. Considerable amount more than the competition. What gives? They are a premium tank. They're polished, they're very thick glass. I mean, the stands are actual real plywood, like, the overflow towers is glass that's like CNC or water jetted out inside acrylic. Like, they are very gorgeous tanks. Again, they're not cheap, but they're a very premium tank. Is going in your basement or your garage, you're not going to see it. Maybe you don't care as much. If it's in the middle of your living room, maybe you want it to be more pristine. Personal choice, right? But they definitely are a nice tank. Philly, thoughts on micro bubble scrubbing? Have you done it? Yes, I have done it, and yes, I have videos on it. So micro scrubbing, basically think of it as turning your tank into a protein skimmer, right? You have a skimmer, you inject bubble air, all those bubbles, they bind to organics, and they pop in the cup. If you do it in your tank, it's going to bind little particles and bring it up to the top so it can come out your overflow. So a lot of people will do it for, one, water clarity. Another big thing is it could just boost the pH of your tank. Now, for doing that, you want to be using like outside air or this air that's not lower CO2, right? So if you have a very sealed up room, you're not gonna get much benefit. But if you're sucking air from somewhere else and pushing it in, it can boost it up. So there's a few benefits there. There's a bunch of other claim benefits, but those are the couple that I'd for sure sit at I've noticed in the past. Joshy Jock, I do a 20% water change every week. Recently cleaned my entire sump pumps, and I actually use pre-mixed salt from a local fish store. There you go. Good on you for doing all that maintenance. That's awesome. How's breeding the Bergia and raising Aptasia going? So, somehow, I don't know how, but the Aptasia tank, little like 5-gallon tank, was right beside the Bergia tank, and somehow a Bergia got into the Aptasia tank. How? I have no idea. Maybe hitched a ride on something, but he basically wiped out all the Aptasia in the tank. So that kind of killed that plant a bit. So I captured all the ones I could find from that tank, and I threw them in a different frag tank that doesn't have any fish in it. There's just snails in there, but it has a bunch of Aptasia. I'm hoping they'll munch on there and hopefully breed. And hopefully by the time I merge that tank into the new frag tank, hopefully there will be a bunch in there that I can move in with it. So hopefully. What other frozen foods can you feed clowns? Pretty much anything. Like I know there's like bloodworms and mysis and all that random stuff. I feed mysis the most because I think it's the more nutritious option. If you have smaller fish, I mean, there's the cannelus, that little red stuff. It smells a bit crazy if you get it on your hands. Watch that one. Aside from that, it's like tons of super tiny, nutritious, really tiny particles. It's good for little smaller mouse and coral and all that type of stuff. Have a small water box cubes. Is there a gyre that would be small enough for 20? One thing that you could do, actually, I've seen Moki do it, where he took off half of the pump, so it was only one half of the gyre that was pushing water through the tank. You can make your own tiny one if you can't find one. Another kind of funky way to do it. Why does pH drop at night? Okay, so if you think about it, you got photosynthesis, right? Like trees and things grow when the light's happening. So your corals are taking that light energy and they're processing some of the CO2 and stuff in your tank. When your lights are off, photosynthesis is not happening, so your pH is dropping. You have just your fish breathing, so they're putting out CO2 as they're breathing, and you have nothing processing it, so that's why your pH drops at night. Now, if you have a refugium with intense light, then your refugium kind of take up the photosynthetic part of the equation, and then that will help boost your pH. Or you could use something like kalkwas or something that will kind of like bind it and help get rid of it. Could it be the fact I got new lights? If your lights are not as intense or things aren't growing or they're still adapting and not in growth mode, that very well could be a chunk of it. Do you think it's important to cover the overflow? It depends. I do mainly just to reduce on my frag tank, not covered. There's algae growing inside of it. If I had a cover, there'd be no algae there. So that's one aspect I would say is worthwhile. My water box is covered mainly because to make it quieter, right? So I don't hear any of the drain noise. So I don't think you need to cover it. Now, the other consideration is, do you have a top in your tank? Could your fish jump in there, right? So all these little things you got to think of. But in general, probably put a cover on this one. What the heck? So yeah, likely a good idea to cover it. You have to? No. But depending on your lighting, could be growing algae and other stuff in there. You're going to clean long term. So blocking that light is kind of your preventative in a way. Can cleaner shrimp and peppermint shrimp be in the same tank? Yes, they can. I've had that before. No issues there. Why are Recordias so expensive? I live in Florida and they're collected all the time. I would actually think they'd be very cheap in Florida, to be honest, because they are local. There's no shipping for you. Akaman, any tips on carbon dosing? Biggest thing with carbon dosing is go slow. Too much is bad, can be trouble. I know at one time when I was dosing carbon, I know one of my yellow tanks had some weird orangey blotchiness to them. I stopped dosing, went away. Now I theorize is because I probably dosed too much too quick. So if you're gonna do it, just go really slow. That's the biggest thing I'd say. If you Google carbon dosing reef tank, there's a bazillion charts that will come up and give you kind of like, hey, week 1 this amount, week 2 this amount, and how to slowly up it. Just start really low and slow, and just slowly up it if you're gonna do carbon dosing. Terrell Johnson, vitamin C, is it important in a reef tank? I've heard back in the day, I used to hear people dosing vitamin C to a tank. I haven't actually heard that in a long time, so I don't know. Some people claimed it was good for like zoas and stuff, but I don't know. It's hard to say for sure. So I can't say. I've never personally done it, but Kevin Johnson, I've watched your culturing pod videos. First time culturing pods. How often do you harvest them? I'm also using Tisby pods. Tisby pods are great ones to culture. Pretty easy. Honestly, just put a very slow bubbler in there, feed them phyto. Probably like once a week or once every 2 weeks, like harvest a bunch, dump them in your tank, which is also going to be a water change for your pods. Add some fresh water. Like, they're pretty easy to do it. Reef on the Fringe, don't forget that thumbs up. Always appreciate it, guys. Makes the YouTube gods happy. Angry Aloe Aquarium, welcome. Do you have a particular carbon method in mind? So there is many ways to carbon dose. There's, you know, most of the major brands make a carbon dosing product, or you can use vodka or vinegar. Like, there's many ways to do it. But you're basically any one of these carbon sources dosing to the tank, very small amounts. And at the end of the day, think of carbon dosing is feeding bacteria. And then the bacteria is what's actually doing the work in your tank. So you're just slowly, but if you carbon dose too much, you're going to create a bacteria bloom, and then that causes other issues. That's why you just want to go very slow with it. Also because if you have too much, it could change your nutrients too fast, and then there's another issue, right, from causing a big swing. You reckon getting a dosing pump will help? If you are not dedicated to do it very small amounts every single day, then yes, it will help. If you're doing a dosing pump for carbon dosing, then you want one that can do like 0.1 of a mil, so very small increments. So keep that in mind. Battle OCR, favorite tang you've ever seen? Honestly, I really like the powder blue. Kind of want one again, but I have too many tangs now that I feel like it's pretty risky to add a powder blue with a purple tang and 3 yellow tangs. I don't know, it seems kind of pushing it. But powder blue is probably one of my favorite. Yeah, we have Recordias $5 each. That's still super cheap. It's like Florida is crazy cheap, especially anywhere near the Keys where they're collected. They're super duper cheap. For me, they're a lot more expensive because I'm like as far as you can get from Florida. But second floor tank size limit without reinforcing the floor. Okay. So it's hard to always know this, but if you have a room that you can look in and see which way your joists are going, this helps. Now, the footprint of your tank also makes a bit of a thing, right? So ideally, if you know which way your joists are running and you put your tank this way, so it goes over top of multiple joists, you're spreading out the load. Now, putting a tank in the middle of a room, right, the wood could potentially like sag down, or if you put it against a low-bearing wall, there's not much room to sag. So placement really plays a lot into it. As like a general, not overly worrying about it, I'm gonna say like the middle of a room with no low bearing wall, maybe like 60 gallons. If you're against a low bearing wall, maybe a 90, 100 gallon. But if you're starting to go to anything above that, I would really make sure that you're okay. Like where I'm putting the frag tank beside me, like there's like a little furnace room below it, and I got 2 of those like ready posts, those big steel posts, and I put 2 of them, one on each joist, that roughly right in the middle of the tank, just as like peace of mind. But I had access to the space underneath, so I was able to do that. So it's something to consider. EA, I know people want outside air for their skimmers sometimes. I've used oxygen detectors as a firefighter, normally under the conditions, never witnessed oxygen levels other than 20.8% in a basement. So it's when people are pulling outside air into the skimmer, it's more that the outside air has less CO2 than the inside air, which means it's going to raise the CO2 level in your tank as it reacts. Or, sorry, raise the oxygen level in your tank. So, like right now there's forest fires out and stuff, so the outside air is probably terrible. I know my throat's all scratchy from having my window open for the last couple hours. But you need, if you're providing air with less CO2 into your skimmer, it's going to help boost the pH of your tank. What would cause a foamy greenish white foam in my refugium? Looks toxic in my Chaeto. It's probably some kind of a slime algae, to be honest. I've had that in my refugium before, like green or red. It's a bit of like a grossness. I think it's just from lack of flow in there. I think I saw a little bit in my Chaeto reactor at one time. How do you feel about calc? I have been debating a calc reactor just to kind of see there makes a difference. I literally have stolen every inch of space in the water box stand, so I'm just about cut off of adding anything else to that tank, minus maybe the UV. But I might try calc reactor on the frag tank and just to see if there's a big difference in the pH boost. I've always been curious. I play a little bit with calc, but I'm a little bit of a lazy reefer and I don't want to be cleaning pumps all the time, so I don't really like the idea of putting the ATO just because it's so much harder on your equipment. But if I was going to do it, I would personally go with a calc reactor. You have to direct feed your Duncans. No, you do not. They will most certainly capture particles out of the water. I'm a big fan of just broadcast feeding the tank. So, you know, take a chunk of frozen food, and half time I just like stick it on the side of my power head, and as it melts, little chunks start flying all over the tank. You know, and the fish obviously grab the big chunks that come out, and all the little bits that circulate the tank, and corals will grab it. So I just broadcast feed the tank fairly frequently, and that seems to work for most things. What dosing pumps that are cheap and reliable would you recommend? If you're dosing stuff of 1 mil or larger increments, honestly, the cheapest one out there is probably the good old Jabo one, which I used for many years. It's like under $100, does the job. I wouldn't be using it for like carbon dosing or like 0.1 of a mil super precise stuff, but larger dosing, it'll do the job. If you want super precise stuff, I'd spend a little bit more and get a bit of a fancier one, but for just a cheap basic dosing pump, I mean, it's hard to beat it for the price. Battle OCR, what's some good ways to keep elk steady? Not sure what something's been sucking mine up. So, honestly, I mean, your easiest, cheapest way is just having a dosing pump for your elk. I'm going to change the song because it's loud. But having just a dosing pump and just figuring out what your daily consumption is and replacing that amount will keep things super duper stable. That's the easiest way. But yeah, that Jabo one for the price is hard to beat. If you want super precise, I mean, you can move up to like the Dose or the Apex or the Kimura or Dostronic. I mean, there's tons of options on the fancier level, but for cheap one, Jabo's probably your best bet. At what point should you switch? Switch from what? If you're ever unsure about tank loading, find a civil engineer. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so Kyle, there you go. It was about $200. You had an engineer do yours. Same thing. I even did a video with Megan, who came and did mine, and got her to assess the situation. Because I was putting a 200-gallon tank upstairs, which is a lot of weight. That's like double what I'd normally say on upstairs. So it was worth it to have an engineer. Peace of mind. You know, there's not going to be stress or stuff happen to your house long term. Realistically, it's fine short term, but it's more 3-4 years down the road. You know, are you permanently sagging joints and stuff like that? So all I had to do is add a couple 2x6s to reinforce the stair header, so mine was pretty easy to fix. A bit of work to like take out the cabinets and whatever, but then I snuck in a couple 2x4s and made it super solid. So that worked for me. But yeah, if you're unsure and you're going big, like it's worth the $100-200 and just get an engineer to tell you what to do or what can handle and make sure you're within that safety zone so there's no long-term issues. Do the calc made a difference with my pH and frags encrusting factor? There you go, Reefing with though. There's a good chance I will try it. Yeah, it's funny. I just switched to headphones and the background music. So I just have random tracks playing right now. Now it is funny because these are like kind of like monitoring-ish headphones. So stuff sounds a lot louder. Like the music actually sounds louder to me. And like sometimes I'm editing a video, I'm like, oh, the music's way too loud. But then I'll listen to it on my phone or somewhere and you don't even hear the music. So it's crazy the difference the different headphones can make. So Reefing with though, I may try it, the calc reactor. There's a good chance I will. Just 'cause I've always been curious about them. Question for you though, how often do you have to clean it and top it off and maintain it? That's one thing I've been curious about. Joshy, should I go to the Wi-Fi or so DP4 is the cheapest one. I would probably do the Wi-Fi if I was going to buy another Jabo, just because the Jabo works well enough, but it's a pain to push the button like 80 times to go to each point and adjust it. So the Wi-Fi is probably going to be a lot easier. Walt, how would you add outside air to a nano? I have a glass skimmer, be able to add to a calc stir. The stand only has room to hold that if possible. So if you're adding outside air, I mean, you literally just drill a tiny hole in your wall and put a little hose in it and put it to your skimmer intake. That's what most people do. Now, if you're in the middle of the house, that's obviously not so easy, but if you're on an outside wall, you might be able to do it. Or if you live somewhere warm enough, maybe just crack a window and poke a little hose through it. So it depends how dedicated you are to the pH boost. Reefer Chili, you're a genius, sticking a chunk of frozen food to the power head. I always sit there thawing in a cup. Oh, best way to do it. Literally walk up, like on this one, I have a little near on the tank. I just stick it on the side of that one, or on my big tank, I just plunk it on the side of the MP60s, drop it close, like sticks to it, and just slowly shoots it out. It's like slow release frozen food feeder. Best way to do it. Good call. I'm using the dose for now. Yeah, if you have a dose, that's perfect. Yeah, so, okay, there you go, Kyle. You had a 60 gallon in where your posts and your joists were, was potentially overloading it long term. So, again, so 60 gallons. Now, yours was more in the middle between the points, right? So, placement of the tank makes a big difference, right? Are you in the middle of a 20-foot span? Are you, right beside a low-bearing wall where you're barely putting pressure on it? Like, that makes a big difference in it. So, good call on that one. My pH run 7.9 lights off, 8.2 when it's on. Yours a pretty good range, to be honest. Mine is about 7.9 to 8, 8.1 if I'm lucky, but usually it's like 7.9 to 8 point something, low something. Works. Reefing with O, I'm using the Vast Marine. I put about a month's worth at a time, continuous duty pump, pull the water from my ATO, calcorrect to the Versa. That's perfect. I'd honestly probably do something similar, and I've been looking at those every once in a while, so it might happen eventually. Florida Squad. We need to spread awareness of the dying reefs. We do need to save our reefs. I 100% agree with you on that one. We must switch to mariculture. I think a lot of stuff is really swapping to mariculture, to be honest. Last fall, I went to the Cayman Islands and helped with the reef restoration project there, which was really awesome. It was a really cool trip. I went diving almost every single day, which was amazing, but helping out with all the reef stuff, like, out cleaning off corals on trees and like scrubbing algae off, and like we hauled out like a new coral tree into the water and hooked it up on the ground and put little buoys on it and floated it up. Like, it was really cool. It was super cool. So like, if you guys have opportunity to like volunteer and do stuff with saving the reefs, you totally should, because it's a really cool experience and you get lots of diving. It's like win-win. So that's a pretty cool way to do it. Paul, finally got a chance to catch the live stream. Heartbreak after breaking down my tank last fall. I'm sorry to hear that. Hopefully you got a new tank up soon, though. I honestly think I would feel a little sad not having a tank, because it's just, I don't know, I'd feel empty a little bit. It's hard, so hopefully get one set up again. Reefing though, anticipate cleaning every 6 months. That's not bad at all if you can go 6 months. Kyle, so with your Apex, what's the actual pH change you saw when you started burning air from outside? So I currently don't have outside air. On my old tank that I had downstairs, I ran a tiny little dinky 1/4 inch line out because I literally snuck it through some crack by the gas line, and it was way too small and restrictive, but I had about a 0.1 of a pH boost. So instead of 8, maybe you're 8.1, right? Or maybe instead of 8.1, you're 8.2. But that's about what I had. If I had a bigger line, I probably would have saw a better boost. I've contemplated running a line, because my tank's in the center of the house, right? Running it up into the attic and sucking air from there. The air would be hotter. I don't know if I'd have to worry about dust or little particulates. I could probably put a filter on it. I've contemplated that. I haven't quite decided if it's worth it yet, but I might, maybe eventually. Glenn, adding a Brightwell brick to a tank that is doing well, good or bad idea? No, I think it's a good idea. It is more surface area for bacteria. So as if you had fish or if you have more nutrients in the tank, you're going to have basically like adding a ton more live rock, aka surface area, for bacteria to help deal and process those nutrients. Now, 2 things to consider with the Brightwell bricks. They do have like a nitrate export, and I think they have a phosphate export, and they are doped with like either like a nitrate or phosphate material. So it may suck out a bit of extra nutrients out of your water. Now they do that because once it's full of bacteria, it will drop those levels on its own through the bacteria, but that little bit of a doping product on it will help that happen until the bacteria kicks over. So just so you know, there's potentially that you may see a little bit of a impact on your nitrates or phosphates, which could be a good thing, but if you're super low, something to keep in mind. Can you even get captive bred yellow and blue tangs now? They sell it fast. I haven't been able to get one. I have seen them for sale, but not as often. I see captive bred clowns everywhere. There's starting to be more like cardinals and blennies and other stuff. I'm starting to see captive bred popping up. So slowly. Kyle, you're in Canada too, so I know we got a little more slim pickings here, where a lot of that breeding's happening in the States. But it is slowly getting more and more. So it'll be awesome to see more and more captive bred happen over time. And I do think the industry's honestly going to be going there. Probably 10, 15 years from now, all we're going to get is captive bred. So I think it's definitely going to be more and more over time. Reefing with, oh, you had a 0.3 boost from outside air. That is a pretty solid difference for you. Skimmer pump size run makes a difference. Yeah, for sure. So I had a very dinky, I 100% know that I was like starving my skimmer a bit, but it's the only size tube I could sneak through that little crack. So when you ran a Royal exclusive pump, it was a huge difference. So there you go. But yeah, if you have an easy way to get outside air to pipe to your skimmer, it is your easiest, cheapest way to get a pH boost, right? Because you're not relying on kelp or any other products. You don't have to buy refills and keep replenishing media. It's free. It's outside air. It's there all the time. The only kind of considerations are if you have neighbors and maybe they use pesticide or something, just be aware that you're not going to suck in any like nasty chemicals into your tank. Now, when I did it, I put a little gray electrical box out there where I poked the hose into it and I drilled a bunch of holes in the bottom and I put a bag of carbon there. That way, any air that was flowing through it flowed through the carbon. So if there was a risk of anything, then it would at least kind of suck it out and just kind of worked as a pre-filter. So I would recommend doing something like that if you're sucking from outside air, just to be safe, just so there was no potential pesticide or contaminants getting sucked into your tank. But aside from that, I think it's an amazing way to do it. Yes, getting fish across the border is a pain. I would agree. Doable, but a pain. Florida squad. I just set up my tank 1 month ago and there's already coralline everywhere. You think I'm ready for stony corals? And sorry for all the questions, thanks for the answers. So coralline growth is definitely a good sign. Basically, you could probably add them, but you're probably still on that like slightly dicey line where they're probably okay, but they probably won't thrive. In my experience, like I've had acros living in a bucket with no fish, power head, heater, and a light. So they can definitely survive as long as things are stable. They'll be happy. Now, most of the time I find you can add them and the odd one might bite the dust, you know, some may live, but usually the older your tank gets, the more successful you can just throw in a coral and have it be happy. And I usually find it's a good 5-6 months till I hit that point. So I wouldn't go crazy on buying acros, but if you want to get 1 or 2 test subjects, it's a good way to kind of test it out. And you know, they'll probably be okay, but they probably just won't start really growing and thriving for a few more months. Oh, that's pretty crazy. So Polly, my son got a yellow tang size of a quarter, not even yellow yet, still clear. Amazing to watch them grow. Yeah, so you got like a fresh little baby, and that's probably captive bred given by that conversation, but it's pretty cool. DC Reefer, how do you pull outside air with an air pump that only has 1 intake or output? So, a couple ways you can do this. One, I actually modified a pump and put my own thing on it. So, in the past, I added an intake tube to the pump. So I don't remember what brand it was. It was white with a black bottom. And I opened it up and you could see where it sucks from. And I siliconed in like a little John Geist style push fitting into it. So I added my own intake. So, or you could use something like an aqua lifter, which has an intake and an outtake, right? And you can use that to suck it. Or at the end of the day, realistically, your skimmer will suck in air on its own. So as long as you're not restricting with like too tiny of a tube, the skimmer will suck in and draw in air. And I didn't even use a pump. I tried using a pump, but I didn't notice it was a huge difference. So just letting it suck in stuff on its own seemed to work pretty well. Now, that's if you're running it through your skimmer, but if you're using it strictly for bubbling, other stuff I've seen done is you could put your air pump in a little sealed up box and have like your 2 outside air going to that box. That way it can only suck from that box, which sucks from outside. So it's kind of a roundabout way of doing it. So we've got a few different options on that one. Joshy Jock, same, I have coralline everywhere, but I'm waiting for a dosing pump so everything is stable. I'm also waiting for my light to finish the Radium Mobius acclimation mode, and I can get some SPS. Now, if you don't have coral in your tank, you don't really need to worry about the acclimation mode as much. The acclimation mode is more so you don't have too much light shocking or being too intense for a coral in there. So the tank necessarily doesn't care as much about it. It's just more your coral that you don't want to hit with too much power before you use them into it. DC, I don't have a skimmer. It's for an all-in-one nano. Thanks for the advice. No problem. You're most welcome there, DC. I do have coral, just not acro or SPS. Okay, fair enough. Yeah, so acclimation mode is just a good safety buffer. Depending on what you're doing. If you're using my schedule, I mean, it can be a bit intense. So either acclimation mode or just drop the percentage down a bit. It really kind of depends on your tank depth. My new one, I don't know what I'm going to run it at yet, but my new one beside me, same thing. I built a similar light rail. I'm going to put my G4s on it. And then I might raise them a little bit higher just because I can, because it's only 14 inches deep. Another thing I've been debating is, so I got my old MP40s and I'm going to put them on there. I was thinking about raising the frag rack up, so maybe I'll 3D print some little legs or stands or something. I was thinking about raising them about 4 inches and then putting the MP40s underneath them. So if I have a bare bottom, and then I could blast the flow underneath the frag rack, and it will come around, bounce off the wall, and come back at the top of the stuff. So I think then I could get lots of flow in the bottom, wouldn't let anything really settle in there, and it would still be a decent amount of flow. So I'm toying with the idea. I'm kind of back and forth. I put the power heads high, or I put them below the frag rack. We'll see. But that may be my project for tonight or tomorrow, is to come up with some little like 3D printed legs to little stand us. Good. Ricardo, what is going on? Kyle, LG Barn has capture bred yellow tangs in stock right now, but they won't ship to Canada yet. Ah, dang. Yeah, it's tricky right now with the borders being closed, because normally you could ship stuff to the border, but not even an option right now, unfortunately. Okay. So Ricardo's asking, how do you know when your acros are getting too much or too less light? So generally, if your acros are starting to brown out and not be as colorful, that usually means they don't have enough light. So more light can help increase kind of the coloration. Now, if your corals are getting pale, that could be a sign of having too much light. So generally, a lot of acros you can acclimate to higher light. You just don't want to do too fast, right? So if you don't have an LED or an adjustable light, you can just start your corals low in the tank, and then, you know, maybe every week or two you move them up a bit higher until they're where you want them. Or if you have LEDs, maybe just put your tank on acclimation mode. So a few different ways to work it. But yeah, generally, if your corals are going browny and losing color, not enough light. Akmal, you lost a bunch of fish due to velvet. I am sorry to hear that. Velvet is a nasty one. How long do I need to starve the parasite till I add new fish? I know I believe it's 67 or 76 days, I think it is. And I think velvet is similar, give or take a week or two. Honestly, give it that 2.5, 3 months, and you're probably safe. But not 100%. Okay, Joshy Jock. I can't download your light schedule, only comes up as text. And if I'm saving it, that's because I'm on an iPad. Okay, so if you click on it and it's not doing it, it's trying to open it as a web page. So I believe you can click and hold your finger down for a few seconds and you'll get a new menu and you can save it that way. But yeah, you just need to save the file. Or if you're on a computer, just right click and save as, use Dropbox or something, get it on your phone, then open it that way. Telegram, welcome buddy. Great Q&A, thank you very much. Yeah, it was a crazy week, so I decided to do QA instead of picking a topic today, but yeah, it was kind of fun. Just random, off topic. Whatever questions you want to throw at me, let's do it. Drama D, do you run a recirculation pump on a calcium reactor? I keep sucking in media and dust into the pump, constantly taking apart to clear the magnet in. The vertex. Okay, so first of all, I'm kind of wondering what you're using for media. So, yes, you always have a circulation pump on them. Generally, what's the vertex? It sucks from the top or the bottom? I think it sucks from the top, then pushes all the way down to the bottom and circulates up. So if you have a ton of dust and stuff, I would probably take all of your media out, use a strainer and rinse it all out. Get rid of all those small particles, all that sand, get all that dust out of the reactor, then put it all back in. And then you should be okay, right? Like, it's either your pH is too low and it melted too fast and it's turning to mush, which is a possibility, or you just have a bunch of other particulates in there that just need a bit of maintenance. What kind of beer do I drink? I like many beers. This one is called Wolverine 76 from a local brewery in town, but I don't know. I like a lot of craft beers. I just mix up with random ones all the time. One of my buddies moved to Texas and gave me his little kegerator fridge, which was dangerous but delicious. So, kind of handy. It's nice not having to deal with bottles anymore. So if you do like beer, having a kegerator is pretty awesome. And the other bonus is, it has a CO2 tank inside. So I have 2 little 5-pound CO2 tanks. So if my CO2 for my tanker runs out, I got a spare. So, dual bonus. Reborn Media. Yeah, so what pH are you running there, Dramedy, in your calcium reactor? Joshy, do you know how I can get rid of my Aptasia? I've been trying Aptasia X, but the darn thing eats like a meal, brown bigger. Okay, so easiest way to kill Aptasia. If it's in a little crevices or somewhere funky, like one thing I've done is just smother it in super glue gel. You're basically putting a little tomb over it so it can't spread. Now, if you have, the other thing I've done more recently is have calc paste. So take kalkwasser, mix a little bit of tank water, like a pancake-ish syrup, put it in a syringe, turn off all the flow in your tank, and then just spot treat. So you take your Aptasia and just go blah and cover it in kalkwasser. And the kalkwasser is going to basically melt it and kill it. The biggest thing is you want it to kill it. If you just stress it out, there's a chance it can spread it out your tank. So you want to make sure you get it good. So I'll squirt that kalkwasser paste just right on top of the mouth and just smother it a bit. Leave your flow off for 20-30 minutes and just make sure it has lots of time to eat it away. And after that, turn your flow on, you're good. So Aptasia X is a great way to do it. If you can use something like peppermint shrimp or Bergia in your tank. The only thing you gotta watch out, depending on your fish, like I have a bunch of wrasses in my tank, which would probably eat my Bergia, and that would just turn to an expensive tank. So kalkwasser paste was easier in that situation. Glenn, any tips for selling at a frag swap? Okay. Biggest thing. So frag swap. One thing when I go to frag swap, it's nice to have coral organized by prices. So you're like, okay, here's the $10 rack, here's the $20 rack, here's the $30 rack. If you can do that. Pre-do all your frags ahead of time, so you don't want to leave this last minute. Like start growing out stuff, make a bunch of frags, let them heal and grow out for a few months. Make sure your frags are all super happy, healthy, colorful. Some people will bring their own water with them, so there's no shock to the coral. So it kind of depends what you're selling. But that I do see like a lot of shows, you know, people always have the crazy blues, which I always call like the crack lights because it just makes the corals extra colorful. But the biggest thing, if you're local, ideally, like if you bring your display tank to the show, you know, make sure you have all your heaters. If ideally have backups of gear, if something dies, something you don't want to be stressing or freaking out last minute. Run carbon in the tank, right? If there's any cloudiness in the water, you want your water to be clear and look good. But the biggest thing is, you know, plan ahead, frag a bunch of stuff, you know, a month or two ahead of time, let it heal, make sure all your stuff's really healthy and good. I mean, bring it to your little display, set her up, you know, as long as, you know, your prices are decent, corals look good. I mean, lots of people will be all over it. Fidel Castillo. Really need an answer. Tried searching, please. Why phosphates high, no nitrates? It likely has to do with one, how are you exporting your nutrients? Maybe something is getting rid of nitrates, not phosphates. It also could be what you're feeding your tank. Maybe what you're feeding your tank is really high in phosphates. So a couple different things. Now, the easiest way to deal with phosphates, if you don't have like a refugium or something like that, so refugium will help suck out phosphate and nitrates. If you want to target specifically GFO or granularic oxide, will suck out phosphate specifically. Now, easiest way for you is honestly probably run a small amount of GFO in a reactor and it'll start slowly lowering your phosphates. Just do not use too much GFO too fast, otherwise it can do some damage by dropping it too quick and then you'll stress out your corals. Macro has great corals. Catching up on all the questions. What do you think I could trade a gigantic neon singularis softie for? That's huge fragging potential. That is a harder one to find, ironically. Actually, I finally got a small chunk of it in one of my frag tanks, but it took a while to find the neon green one. Honestly, coral prices are so subjective and crazy. Like, certain ones I find in Canada are cheap and it's crazy in the States or vice versa. Like if I want a nice rock flower here, it could be like $100. I can go buy one in Florida for $30, right? Now, it's just like a Dragon Soul torch here. I see them for like 200 bucks. If I go to the States, I've seen them at shows for like 500-600, which I'm like, that's crazy that much. So prices of coral are crazy. If I sell a coral, I look at what it sells for online, and it's like, oh, this is a $70 frag. I'm like, I don't know, 50 bucks. Like, I just make it cheaper. Like, personally, I don't know. I think corals are overly priced, but I love them and I still buy them. So I don't know. I like giving people a deal. So personally, when I price stuff, I just see what others are selling it for and go a bit cheaper and give someone a good deal. That's my strategy. So yeah, honestly, and prices in every area are different. It just depends. Like, I've seen some areas they're like, oh, here's like a hammer for 20 bucks. Another place they're like, oh, it's an $80 hammer. I'm like, I don't know, it's still that one for 20 bucks. So it really depends. It's crazy, and it all really depends on where you are in your local area. I'm running Rorophos and do have a refugium and Chaeto. Thanks for the reply. I'll keep tackling the phosphate issue first. Okay, so could be, you have a Chaeto, refugium, and Rorophos, so you could just try using a little more Rorophos. Just add a bit more to it. But yeah, generally it's probably whatever you're adding to your tank to feed it is probably just high in phosphates. So when would be okay to start putting coral in a newly cycled tank? You could put coral in pretty darn quick. Coral itself isn't overly impacted by the cycle. The fish are. Like, I wouldn't hesitate to add coral to this tank, my new frag tank, like a day or two after I set it up. Now, adding fish, on the other hand, you need to make sure it's cycled, because coral itself don't produce much waste. It's very minimal. But fish and stuff, you know, all the fish food, the fish poop, all that jazz is going to be putting the ammonia into the water, and ammonia is toxic to fish, right? So once your bacteria culture builds, your ammonia converts to nitrite, which is less toxic, and then that converts to nitrate, which is even more or less toxic. So each step of the way gets kind of more or less toxic. That's why you got to cycle it. Llama Gould, I've got some green stuff growing on the sand. Did 4 to 5 blackouts, no algae. The green stuff on the sand come out only when lights are on. To me, that sounds like you likely have cyanobacteria. It's mainly red, but yes, there's also green cyanobacteria. I would probably honestly just use a bit of chemiclean and just be done with it. Suck it out first, get as much as you can out, dose a bit of chemiclean. When I dose chemiclean, I think it says wait 48 hours. I like to wait an extra day, so 72 hours. Then do a water change, because I find that extra day just hits a little better. But to me, being that it's green and photosynthetic, I got my money on it's likely cyanobacteria in your issue. I've never actually used Rorophos. Is it basically high capacity GFO or something different? I have used it. I don't fully know what it is. It is something GFO-ish, but it does other stuff as well. I don't fully know. I've only used it once. I had one can I used, but I know it works for phosphates and likely has some other benefits that I'm not 100% sure on. I don't think I have the container anymore. Luma Gold, thank you for the $4.99 super chat. Got clowns, just wondering when I could get corals. So Bobcat's Reef, you could honestly probably start adding corals whenever you want. If it's a new tank, I would probably wait a little bit longer on the acros, but I wouldn't hesitate to throw in like softies or zoas, maybe some LPS right now, and they'll probably be fine. Joshy, my corals are having issues, but I'm working on getting things stable with a dosing pump. All my fish are super healthy and never had any issues. Good to hear. Do you reckon I could get a blue tank? First of all, it kind of depends a little bit on how big your tank is and what else is in the tank. In general, when you're worrying about dosing, that's more for the corals and the fish. As long as your pH and other stuff, which most people's tank is going to be fine as long as your tank's established. Like, the fish are generally okay, right? Your tank's cycled, you don't have any ammonia or any of that type of stuff, is fully cycled, then you're pretty safe for fish. As for the coral, the biggest thing with coral is alkalinity. Like, calcium matters, yes, but it's depleted much slower than alkalinity. Same with magnesium. Like, as long as your magnesium's in range, your calcium's in range, like, you can probably test those every once in a while, but alkalinity is the one I keep the biggest eye on. And as long as it's in a fairly stable range, then I'd say you're fine for coral. Going back to balling, any experience mixing in the K and elements from Tropic Marin? I have not personally used those ones, but I know some of them that you can mix within the balling, so it can work. What's a good LPS amino acid? I've only used KZ, looking to try newer ones. So I've also used the Red Sea AB, Two Little Fishies, whatever it's called, Acro Power, and I've also used the Brightwall one. Now, I don't necessarily know what's in each of these blends of amino acids, but honestly, any of them will work, right? Maybe, like, I mix them up of which one I use. So, but I know they're all going to work, right? Now, some amino acids, if you overdose it, you could potentially get cyano or other stuff could happen. So sometimes less is more, right? You want to supplement to have it, but just don't dump in like crazy amounts because that may have a negative result through cyano or other stuff. But any aminos is probably going to give your tank some benefits. Sometimes I'll mix it in with my food too if I spot feed corals, and then you're kind of hitting it direct to the corals. Sometimes I'll just dump it in the tank randomly to mix it up. Jay's Reef. I'm using Brightwell's, the only one I've used, so no comparison. Yeah, no, that's fair enough. I mean, honestly, any of them are going to help. It's really hard to say if one works better than another one. So it depends, like, right? If you're putting one hand dosing versus on a doser, like the Red Sea one, for instance, the new one, I think you can only have a week's worth not refrigerated, right? Or like Acro Power, you can put on a doser. Or like the Brightwell one, or like the Polyplub one, they're more of a dropper, they're way more concentrated. So that one you probably just want to more hand dose it once in a while. So it kind of depends. Do you reckon it's safe to host a blue tang? My tank is 4 foot long. Probably good on a baby down the road getting a water box peninsula. Nice. Okay, so baby blue tang, 0 issue. Full grown blue tang at like 9 to 12 inches, probably an issue. So if long term you are going to upgrade your tank, I'd say you're fine. Or, you know, at some point, maybe your fish is getting too big and you need to rehome it, that's fine. As long as, you know, that's an option, then there you go. Like it's just the fish relative to the tank size, right? Like, yes, a fish can outgrow it, but if you have a plan for it later, fair enough, right? If you're going to keep it in there forever and ever, then you might want to reconsider. So you really gotta do that. And I always find it hard when people just say a tank size, because tanks come in all dimensions, right? So you can't go off gallons. But in my personal opinion, longer is better for any of those very active fish because it's all about the swimming space. Florida Squad, I have 2 AI primes on a 30 by 12 by 16 display area. Is that enough for acro and LPS? Your tank is 16 high. I'd say you're probably fine. 30 inches, you're probably... Yeah, I had 1 AI prime on a 18-inch cube, right? So, and it did an awesome job. If you're really worried, you could always add a 3rd one down the road once your tank is packed and have 3, then you're 100% good. But I think you'd be fine with 2 for now. Acro Power never worked. I use Acro Power. I have a buddy that actually swears by Acro Power. Like, he says when he stopped dosing and dosing it, he says within a few days he noticed a difference in his corals. He dosed it a lot though. Like, he dosed 15 or 16 gallons a day on his 150 gallon tank. When I dosed it, I probably underdosed it. So I was always on the fence to say how much it actually did. Glenn, best calcium reactor. Are they easy to size? I think it's better to have one that's slightly oversized. And the main reason I found is the bigger the reactor is, the more media it holds, the more stable it will be. If your reactor is too small, there could be a point where the pH in your reactor may not be consistent because you're pulling too much effluent through it. And it could be messing with it. Or if you have a really big one, you know, it's going to be rock solid stable and it's going to keep everything stable. So if you had the option, I would go for one slightly bigger than your tank. Then if you ever upgrade, you're still good. And it's going to have that extra bit of stability. Like, I know the one on my tank is like hardcore. It's rated for like 300 to 800 gallons or something crazy. So it's way bigger than my tank is, but it is dead stable. So I'm a fan of going slightly oversized for a reactor if you have the choice. Red Sea AB Plus to be safe in a doser like the DSR. Okay, so AB Plus, I wouldn't worry about the containers or the doser itself. However, just make sure it's not one of the products you have to refrigerate. Like the amino acid, the 2-part one they want it to be refrigerated. So that's where you'd run into issue, not necessarily the container itself. KZ LPS Amino were great. Pretty expensive for tiny bottles. Yeah, all the KZ stuff I've actually liked, but it is freaking expensive. I'm currently using the Flatworm Exit and the Coral Booster on my water box. I've been trying these out. Now things are encrusting, they're growing, they're happy. Is it my tank aging? Is it because I'm dosing stuff? Like, it's really hard to say, so it's always hard to say with these products. That being said, stuff is looking awesome in there. Now I'm only doing a half dose. Like, I've had people say like their tanks look great when they dosed it, they stopped and their corals look like crap. I was kind of like, I don't know if I'm gonna like give them, you know, just like crack drug and then take it away from them and they'll be all mad. I've only ever done a 50% dose, so like I should be dosing like 8 mils a day. I'm only dosing 4, and the other one, you know, instead of 4 mils, I'm dosing 2 mils. I'm only giving a very small amount, so the jury is still out on that one. I'm still on the fence if I'm gonna buy more bottles and keep it going, but we'll see. But at a half dose, it's not too bad financially, but they're still very expensive for those bottles. There was one I read about with the Flatworm Exit. I have a DIY version using like, I think it's like a wormwood extract, and you can buy that fairly cheap. So I'm like, I can make a gallon of this for like 20 bucks. Like, there's probably more stuff that's in there that I don't know about, but I might try the DIY version on the frag tank just to experiment and see if I notice any difference in growth or any changes. So that's likely one of my future mad scientist experiments to try. Robert, I have a 165 watt black box tank, 6 months old, can't grow coralline in it with all the live rock covered. It's going brown. Many people use multiple Kessels, Radions, etc. Okay. So if you have not introduced coralline algae into your tank, it has nothing to grow from. You need to introduce coralline algae for it to grow. Like in my tank, I literally just added some snails or snail shells that had coralline into it, and that's what started coralline in my tank. So you need to have a source in order for it to spread. So, you know, maybe off a buddy of the reef tank, go take a rock, take something that's already covered in that purple pink, and then add that to your tank. And that's going to help yours grow, or just go scrape it, rub it on the rock, something like that. As for the lighting, honestly, black box or Radions, Kessels, either one, they're probably going to grow the coralline. You can grow corals with cheap lights, you can grow corals with expensive lights. Like, a lot of what you're paying for is the extra stuff, right? More colors, better color rendition, you know, app controls, all these other fancy features, you know, sleeker form factors, but they're both going to work. One might work better than the other, but they'll both still work. So, do you have to, Joshy, wait, do you have to refrigerate your calcium, alk, and magnesium? Calcium, alk, magnesium, no. Some amino acids, like the Red Sea, whatever they're called, want to be refrigerated. The normal dosing stuff, no, you do not. What are your thoughts on Mastertronic and using off-the-shelf test kits? I think the Mastertronic will be sweet, and I want one. I have 2 Alkatronics and a Dostronic, so I already have a bunch of the Tronic family of products, I guess, and they've been awesome. They've been really reliable for me, so I've liked them. I've had my original Alkatronic maybe like a year and a half now. Might be 2 years, a year and a half. It's been a while. 6-8 months ago, like, I liked it. I picked up a used one that was buggered, and I replaced a part and I fixed it, so now I have 2 of them. So they've been good for me, so I like them. So I have a lot of faith in the Mastertronic being a cool product. What's going on, K-Town Reefer? Good to see you on here. The snails are legends. Snails are handy. Drama D, I've seen wormwood thing for killing flatworms. Too scared to try it, plus no flatworms. So I don't have flatworms in my water box, but I honestly, there was all these claims of people saying they've got better colors and better growth, or like they make your corals encrust faster. And it's so hard to say if that's true, but that's the main reason I tried it. So I don't know if the wormwood extract would do the same thing. So I may try making my own DIY batch and try it on the frag tank once everything's in there and happy. I know it's stable in the first place. And same thing, I'll probably just try it at a half dose, and there's no issues, maybe I'll up the dose a bit and just slowly work it in and see if there's that. But again, it's hard to say for sure if that's what's causing the difference or not, but we'll see. I might do it. I have the Dostronic 5 dosing heads. I still have like 2 or 3 heads doing nothing, so I could put one to use for that experiment. It'd be good. Do you reckon blue tanks are safe to keep if your fish aren't stressed? I am so confused by that question. Okay. Don't stress out any of your fish and they'll be fine. Generally, as long as nothing stressing out your fish, I mean, they're gonna be pretty good, right? Blue tangs get stressed out easier. I kind of find they're wusses and they'll hide a lot. So you just want to make sure you have a nice, happy environment for them, nothing spooking them. You don't have other aggressive fish fighting with them. Again, a big thing with aquascapes is making sure that you have caves for everything. So if you make sure all the fish that you add have their own little cave or little nook in the tank to kind of hide away and sleep at, and then when they do, they'll be much happier. That's what I meant. Perfect. Good thing I got it right. Oh my gosh, guys, we've been at like quite a while already. Almost 2 hours. All right. If you guys have any last questions, let me know. I think we're almost at 2 hours. I still want to run to Home Depot and get some wood and start building the bottom platform for my frag tank where the sump and all that stuff is going to go on it. So let me know if you got any last minute questions. Otherwise, I'm going to call her pretty quick so I can actually accomplish a few more things tonight before the stores close. Shout out from Jeremy, almost 3 a.m. Ugly Reefer, 1, shout out to you, and thank you for the late night live streaming with us. It's pretty awesome. What's going on, Sherry? K-Town? End. Thanks for everything and have a nice week. Thanks so much, Ricardo. Laman Gold, Marcos Reef, Reggie, Sky High Reef. Thank you guys for the super chat today. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's been a little while, but yeah, I appreciate you guys. Thank you guys very much for that. And if you guys are on, Cayman Eco Divers, Todd and Robert on my Patreons, thank you guys as well for supporting the channel. All right, guys, hopefully you enjoyed it today. Maybe once a month I'll start doing just the random ones and just answer random questions rather than being like super topic specific. It's kind of fun. I don't know. It's like to mix it up. But again, guys, hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, hit that like button. If you're new, make sure you subscribe. Florida Squad. 12 Zoa's growing like crazy, sell my frags, but scared I won't be taken seriously. Not at all. Honestly, man, if you have nice coral, you know, it displays nicely, people are going to buy it. Don't worry about it. Doesn't matter if you're younger or older. I don't think it's as relevant. You know, just come in, you know, be professional, set it up nicely, just run it like you a little business. You'll be good. Don't let that hold you back. Joshy, would having a pod hotel in the sump hosting pods be a sustainable way to feed 2 mandarin shrimp? If you are using the pod hotels, you need to lure the pods in, so you need to make sure you add food to it. So take some pellets or flake food, something, crush it up, kind of squish it in there, and then you're going to lure pods in by giving them something to eat inside of the pod hotel. You can go shaking your tank once in a while. Honestly, the easiest is having a big refugium, and they'll naturally get in through your return pump, but little pod hotels are a way to kind of like boost it a little bit here and there. A couple of ways. All right, guys, hope you enjoyed it. Have a wonderful evening. I'll see you guys next Wednesday's live stream or Monday morning's video.